Hello all, we are back with another podcast. This time it is designed for MSME owners. Let me set the context of this podcast. See, MSMEs are now exporters, they are the suppliers to large enterprises, and they are subject to global standards of competition. This is the writing on the wall. They need to run their business by systems, process, and policies. Most of the MSMEs have policies pertaining to HR policy, finance policy, account policy, warranty policy, quality policy. And most of the MSMEs at the same time don't have IT policy. We need to understand that IT is an enabler for MSMEs to prepare them for global competitive standards. And most of the MSMEs are still having vague IT policies. So in this podcast, I'm going to explain the approaches to design an IT policy framework in any enterprise. So there are two approaches you can take to design your IT policy framework. One is an intuitive IT policy, or another is zero trust IT policy. Intuitive means it takes everyone in participation. It depends more on moral and professional values, and then IT policy is defined. On other side, zero trust means it really does not depend on everyone's or whoever are the participants, their professional values, their professional values, their moral values. It just enforces. So we'll understand the difference with examples, and I will explain what kind of framework you have and what kind of components of that entire framework you should have in your IT policy. So the first chapter in your IT policy framework should be about data centralization. Your data, which is your digital assets. You need a centralization policy for your digital assets. You cannot afford your digital assets to be scattered on multiple devices. They can be lost, they can be stolen. So you need to have data centralization policy. Data centralization policy can be approached with two different ways. One is intuitive policy towards data centralization. Another is zero trust policy to data centralization. What is about intuitive policy? In intuitive policy, organization invests in a central location, invests in a central storage infrastructure, and it advises the user to save their data on the central location. So it depends a lot on professional and moral values of the users. If they take those advices seriously, they will save that particular data on the central location, and data centralization policy of the organization would be affected. Another approach is zero trust policy, where users are not left with the choice where they can save the data. They are forced to save data on the central location only, and that is called zero trust policy, which does not require users' participation, which is not at the mercy of the discretion of the user where they would save the data. So if you have intuitive policy, you need very matured users, very IT savvy users who understand that this is my enterprise policy and I have to comply with that. Or you can have zero trust policy if your users are not tech savvy, your users are not very matured, or you don't want them to decide where they would save the data. You can have a zero trust policy. Our product BLACKbox is equipped with a concept called autocratic centralization, which does not allow user to store data where he or she wants, but it will allow the users to save data only on the central location, either in local area network or over VPN. So this should be the first chapter of your IT policy framework about data centralization. You should be clear about your policies pertaining to data centralization. Another chapter in your IT policy framework should be about data deletion and restoration policy. Your data can be accidentally or intentionally deleted. And if it is deleted, you might lose that data and you might lose business continuity. It will affect your operations. So either you can have a data deletion and restoration policy in which you can educate your user about the hazards of data deletion, about the consequences of data deletion, and request them to be accountable, responsible, and matured enough while they are deleting the data. This is an intuitive approach to policy making. There is another approach which is zero trust approach to policy making. What it does, we don't have to educate the users. If they delete the data, it is captured somewhere, and when it is required, it can be restored. And it will also tell us that who has deleted the data. So in case the user has acted irresponsibly by deleting the data intentionally, there would be an evidence and there would be all scope for actions against that user. So it is you who has to decide whether you want to have an intuitive approach to this data deletion and restoration policy, or you want to have a zero trust policy. In our product BLACKbox, we have a technology called active recycle bin, which captures the data deleted by the users. Whether user wants it or not, user does not have access to that active recycle bin. So enterprise can restore the deleted data easily, and it also logs who has deleted the data. So in case the data is intentionally deleted with some malified intention, organization can take the actions against the user. So the third chapter in your IT policy framework should be about data backup policy. So you should have a policy how your data would be backed up, who will back up, who is responsible for that. So what we can do as an intuitive approach to the policy, we can tell users that this is the backup location on the network or on the cloud, and time to time, regularly, you should back up all your data. It could be your email data, it could be your designs, drawings, documents, Excels, PDF, presentations, or your application data. The user has to back it up regularly with responsibility. Or you can have an IT team which does this job for the users. This is an intuitive way of backing up the data, and this is an intuitive backup policy. You can have a zero trust policy also, where the backup happens automatically. The backup happens of your application data, of all the data used by the users in terms of designs, drawings, files, everything, emails, or it will also back up a certain data which could be generated by your equipments. Nowadays, IoT is also very well implemented among the enterprises. So all that data will be backed up automatically. It will be backed up in versions. This should also be the part of your backup policy, that how many versions of which category of the data you would like to keep. So the data will be backed up automatically. It will be backed up in versions, and a report will be generated, and it will go to some managers who can monitor that report, and in case there is any error displayed in that particular report, they can proactively act and correct the matter. So there are two ways. One, you allow users to take the backup themselves and trust them. Another is zero trust policy, where you don't depend on users' diligence to take the backup, and just get the backup done with your policy of versioning also. So our product BLACKbox actually follows zero trust backup policy. It does not allow user to interfere the backup process. The backup happens by itself of the data residing on user's computer, or on the file server, or on the application servers, or on the email servers. It takes the backup, it maintains that backup in desired versions, and it generates the report so that it can be monitored and errors can be corrected proactively, so that we don't land up in a situation that we realize that there was an error in the backup when we require it. So additional chapters in your IT policy framework should be about data leakage prevention policy of the enterprise. data can be leaked or stolen over USB port, emails, or internet. So you should have very clear-cut, well-defined policy on how and to what extent user can use USB ports, user can use email system, or user can use internet. And once this policy is ready, users can be educated about it. Again, there are two different options. One, you can have an intuitive approach to the policy in which you can tell users that this USB port should be used responsibly so that no viruses are entering because of your personal USB ports, USB drives, or you should not take enterprise data on your USB drives. You have to educate them for moral and professional values. You can also ask users to use organization's email system responsibly. They should not misuse it to take away the data of the organization out. You can also educate the users to use internet responsibly so that there is no virus threat because they go to some bogus websites. At the same time, we have to educate them they don't upload anything on the internet which is belonging to the organization, which can lead to data leakage. So this is an intuitive approach by educating users for professional and moral values. Another is zero trust, where organization has systems in place so that, let's say for example, if USB policy is implemented and let's say a user requires only keyboard and mouse, then he can only use keyboard and mouse, nothing of mass storage. In case user is required to access USB port for digital signatures or for some software licenses on HASP or maybe some internet dongles, only those things can work and user cannot take the data on the USB media. He can only read the USB media. So this can also be done. So that is called, we only allow inwarding, we don't allow outwarding. Or third could be a user is required to take data on the USB port. Zero trust policy would also enforce a report on every usage of the USB drive. So if user takes the data because he is allowed by the enterprise to take the data, then the report will go to his supervisor and it will be also an evidence. Similarly, if it is about mail, zero trust policy would enforce and categorize the users in various different categories. Like some users can send emails only inside the organizations, some users can send emails only to whitelisted email IDs, some users can send emails but the copy would be received by the supervisor, some users can send emails but only it will go out if it is approved by the supervisor. We can control the attachments which are being exchanged on the email. So this is part of zero trust approach to policy making. In internet also, we can define that users can access certain websites only, and in case they want to access some other websites which are not allowed by the enterprise for the risk of data leakage, and they want to access it for their professional purpose, for research or for business development, there can be a technology where user can go to such websites, but at that time enterprise's data is isolated, so he cannot pick up anything and upload it. So this is called zero trust policy. Our product BLACKbox has all these things in place. It can control the USB at 3 levels, allow USB only for keyboard mouse kind of non-mass storage device, or allow USB only for digital signatures or for dongles, or allow USB for even taking out the data, but at the same time the report will be generated. It has full-fledged mail distribution system which can allow n number of policies so that you can have minimum data leakage possibilities and we have minimum monitoring overheads. It can also make sure that when user is using restricted websites, the data is available. When user is going to some other websites which are not allowed to him in his job profile, when user is on demand accessing such internet, at that time data is automatically isolated. So this is called zero trust approach to policy making. So every enterprise should have policy pertaining to its IT usage. The user should be clear what are their rights, what are their duties, as long as usage of information technology infrastructure in terms of storage, in terms of desktops, in terms of laptops, in terms of mobile phones. And once this policy is clear, I would say it would be a step towards again business which is very well driven by processes, policies, and systems. So, this is about this podcast. I thought it was useful to share how policy making happens, and MSMEs can now take this reference and make their own policy framework. In case you need any help, we can also help you in making the policy. Thank you very much.